Hi everyone, I'm Susan Corbett. I have a Judy Niemeyer Quiltworks star quilt for us today. I'm a freehander. I've been quilting for about 25 years, and I have a new-ish long arm that I'm still trying to get used to, but all of this quilting was done freehand or with rulers. I think it's really striking, as most of these kind of quilts are. Here's a look at the before, so you can kind of think, how would I have quilted this? So the mandate from the client was, it'll be a gift, it'll be in a show, but let's not go all completely out. So I was trying to use some restraint here. She didn't want this to be particularly floral, because these details here in the border are not exactly flowers. They look more like succulents to me. So we thought long and hard about what to do, but one of the first ideas I had was outline the border print, which I love to do. And I decided to use Quilter's Dream wool batting to make those petals really puff up, and I think they really do. So here's just a little look at quilting the border print. It wasn't as tedious as some of these can be. It went pretty quick. There's a lot of backtracking in here. I mean, not that I went over it 8 times, but I'm just saying there was a whole lot that needed to be backtracked. Those petals really leap out, and they ended up being design inspiration for some other elements of this quilt. So really pretty. I went with a skinny little polyester thread. It's Madeira in blue, and that's what most of the quilt was quilted with. When I got down to the purple fabrics, I changed to a purple, blue, and I think pink variegated. This machine loves thinner threads more than thick ones, and really thread color wasn't a prominent element of this quilt. There's so much deep saturated color that the thread doesn't really show up. Even in areas where the thread contrasts, it's still pretty darn subtle. Yeah, see the frame next to the border? Or that the thread is a light blue? You know, that's where you're going to see it. All right, so I put off quilting the center of this quilt for a really long time. There's a thing that happens when you stabilize the quilt. Ditch quilting and most of it. Things just pop into my head. You know, it would be great to do this here or do that there. You know, ideas come of their own volition. And one of the things I thought about here was let's do that petal. That would be a fast, quick, good way. It's the same shape as the patch here. And one consideration is whenever you've got star points that all come together in the middle, you don't want to over quilt that area. You'll get, it'll turn into an innie or outie type of thing. It's going to want to get stiff and pucker. It'll stick up, or if you push it down, it'll stay down and make a divot. So in the end, I think this quilt is going to have to be blocked, which isn't that hard to do, and I don't think it's going to take very much, but certainly some. So I just like how easy and mostly effortless this was, and it looks really good. It got a little bit dicey when I got to the end of the petal points, the patches I mean. Had to do a little bit of stopping and starting, or retracing my steps along the edge of the patch in the ditch. But anybody can do this. You know, you can make really formal arcs or put in a little bit of a curve, add some lilt to it, and neither will be wrong. I think mixing up those two approaches, you know, makes for a really nice mix that I like a lot. So this doesn't require tremendous skill. Anybody can do it. I quilted this, the whole center star in the blue thread. It doesn't really show up in either one of the fabrics. You know, these deep saturated colors just eat color. So you can see it a little bit here and there, but there was no point in switching back and forth between the blue and the purple. The blue just slid right in. Not the biggest consideration. Oh, and look at all that dimension. Isn't that gorgeous already? That is just so pretty. So much big payoff for so little work. And the reason that's important is because the more I quilted on here, it seemed like the more there was to quilt. This took a long time, and I don't know. I was looking for ways, and I always am, you know, what's the fastest, quickest way to get around this thing so I can save myself some time and not have to have a great big price be the outcome of the end of all that work. One of the benefits of freehanding is that you don't have to spend a lot of time setting something up on a computer. You know, you just lock off your threads and go for it. I think it saves a whole lot of time. The seam between the white and the blue here, that has been ditch quilted on both sides. And I did that, I did almost all the ditch quilting in clear thread because there was such high contrast between the fabric colors. So clear seemed to be the way to go. I don't know if you can tell that there's each one of these points, you know, kind of turned out differently. The quilting, that is. They're not perfectly symmetrical. I didn't count out the exact number of petals to make in each one. That's not the point of freehanding. It doesn't matter. It looks really good. And I totally think it's worth it to make all these thread color changes. I don't think this quilt would be anywhere near as good without the ditch quilting. I really don't. I'm a big believer in it. I know lots of people don't even fool with it, but the payoff is enormous. I know a lot of quilters would prefer to baste instead of ditch quilting, but I believe in ditch quilting. I think with basting, you've got to get that thread out of there, don't you? So that just adds another step that I wouldn't want to fool with. That's taken up more time. I think it makes much more sense to ditch quilt, because that ditch quilting will be there permanently and it serves a really important purpose. It makes everything look a lot more polished, tailored, finished. You know, what you don't quilt down sticks right up. Do you want the seams to stick up? Sometimes, but hardly ever. I did check on the name of the pattern because I get asked that quite a bit. That's not my focus. My focus is on the quilting. But this one is called Crimson Poppy. And this one didn't turn out to be very crimson, but whatever. It's a beautiful color combination here. Moving on, one detail I think is crucially important. I like to quilt the frames. This one was like, I don't know, a 1/2 inch or 3/4, something like that. I think a lot of people just ignore that. They think, well, it's too small, you don't have to fool with it. If you leave it unquilted, it's going to create a weak spot in the quilt. That's where it's going to bend and it'll wear unevenly. Frames don't require a lot, but you'd be surprised how many things you can think of to quilt in a frame. There's so much. And here I had to stop in the middle of that wavy line and advance the quilt some. I wouldn't recommend that for all kinds of things all the time, but in this case, that seemed to be the way to go. Resuming quilting once you've stopped and preserving a smooth line, that's a real challenge. So it pays to know where you're going to stop and start and, practice getting a smooth transition. But I think the payoff is huge. It gives you one more detail to delight the eye, and it's extremely well worth it. All right, now, your big, open, light-colored areas that read mostly as solid, that's where you want to pick out a really gorgeous design. This is where we are performing for the Academy. All the quilting there is going to show up. And the client's one request was, do something gorgeous and showy in here. So we thought long and hard about an idea, and then this one finally came to me. I love this design. This is a meander. In a book I have by a long armer named Irena Bluhm. I don't know if this book, I'm sure it's not still in print. There's a lot of designs in there, and this is the one I use most often. And you can find a whole lot of other similar feather meanders out there. There's a ton of them. So find one you like and practice it and do it. You will love the results. I have used this meander, itty bitty, great big. This is a wonderful way to quilt an entire quilt. Those feathers look wonderful, really small and really, really, really big. You can cover some ground. It's not the fastest design out there, but it's totally fun. And I just think it looks outstanding. It's just really beautiful. So I like to mix up great big ones and little bitty ones. The more contrast you put in, the happier I am. I think contrast is the name of the game. So large and small. I don't mean thread color. I mean in design element. And I always find myself stopping and starting a lot with this one. Although, as you'll see upcoming, it's an easy one for retracing your steps. And as you go, you can fill in all the little tiny nooks and crannies with some dimensional quilting, some little bitty background a baby stipple or just some echo to get back to where I want to go. I didn't know if this was going to fit the space very well, but one of the reasons we use feathers so much, and there's a lot of reasons, is because they'll fit in any shape. And, look at the shapes here. They're all pretty different. How you get a bunch of feathers to go in a spiky point, down there at the lower left. But you can. It's a lot of fun. And it just looks gorgeous. So remember, we wanted a big payoff without all the effort in the world. And this was one good way to get it. The thread is a contrast, but it's a very, very low contrast. So it just looks gorgeous. I've included quite a bit of this in this video, so you can see it from different angles and see how each one is the same, only different, and what the varying sizes are going to look like, and how to maneuver in and out of each unit, and how to background quilt it. I'd also say that this design is appreciated by not just women, but men. I thought it might look too feminine to some people, but that has not been my experience. And it looks good on frilly things and not so frilly quilts as well. So that's another benefit of it. Her book, okay, the designer is Irena, Irena Bluhm, Bluhm, and the name of the book is Blooming Background Designs. Look for it out there on the secondary market. You might find it. Or maybe she still has some. I don't know. But it's well worth the hunt. This design is addictive. I love to do it. And I'm excited when I can do it, as often as possible. So the high loft batting really helps this one stand up. I think the appeal of it might be lost on a flat cotton bat. It's, I think it would look too contemporary anyway. But here the dimension is just gorgeous. I like to make sure that these go in different directions. So if I start one of these and it goes to the left, the next one I do, I want it to go to start out at the right. You get better contrast that way. And the stops and starts, you open with a little bitty loop and echo it very close together. And then start adding little feather petals. And your first ones and maybe your last ones are going to be teeny tiny compared to the rest of them. But that's okay. It's just whatever you need to fit the space. And some of the larger ones, like, I don't know, you kind of have to figure ahead of time how far out you want it to go. But one of the things I like about it is that it's not perfect. Each one can be a whole different size and they just look great. I mean, how could you use them all the same size? I don't think that would work at all. And as usual, with any meander, I think you want to learn by doing and see for yourself which one of these, where exactly am I going to make that go, and what's going to happen when I get over here, and what to do with the little odd leftover spaces. I'm always filling in with a bunch of little feathers that might go in the opposite direction or whatever. And in some of these points out here at the end, you know, I blew off the feather and just did some little bitty circles or some kind of tendril or whatever. Practice is key in all of machine quilting. And this is some fun practice to do. So much fun. Moving on to another element, there were these arches with the border print. And I thought, well, the quilting's not really going to show up too much. What can I do in here? So I looked at all kinds of things online. I was just looking at basic shapes, which is a thing I do often. You know, people ask, where do you get these ideas? Well, I'm always looking at designs. And something I looked at made me think, oh, well, let's just do curls. Curls are kind of feather-like, but, you know, a little bit different. They're kind of swirl-like, but a little bit different. And it's another variation on the petal shape in the border print. So this is what I ended up with. And this is just, you know, playing around with stuff and seeing what's going to work out. You know, if I get these curls in, what is going to happen in the space left over? When I started out, you know, I got a circle ruler and was really meticulous about getting that shape in the right spot. And then after a while, I just blew that off in favor of freehanding it. It's eminently doable. The thread doesn't show up very much in here. So the resulting quilting is going to give you these beautiful shapes that do not need all the precision in the world. See how the curl is small, and then they get big, and then we go back to small. And what I did here at the point just kind of worked itself out. It's an arch with some echo and some little bitty feather shapes, and there it is. And that's pretty darn quick. I love the way that turned out. Okay, so more curls. See, is any quilting really going to show up in that batik there in that dark blue fabric? A little, but not much. And I thought curls would be a really good way to get in and out of those spaces. So I wish I had come up with a continuous design. That's the drawback here. There were a lot of stops and starts. I guess I could have ditch quilted all the way back down to the point where the quilting originates, but I didn't want to do that because I ditch quilted in clear, and now I'm quilting in light blue. You don't want your ditch quilting to be visible. You know, you normally want to use a thread color that matches the fabric, and that light blue really called attention to itself in the ditch. So that's why I stopped and started quite a bit. But I think it's really pretty. You could do as much or as little in these spaces. When I got to the point, I overlapped a little bit, which I think is kind of good. Well, and being freehand, you know, a different thing is going to happen here and there. I don't think that's bad. I'm not aiming for perfect symmetry or perfection or exactitude. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. You could spend all day long quilting those shapes. Remember, we were looking for something that would be kind of quick. And this kind of was. And consistent. I like it when they overlap. I'm glad the thread does contrast so you can see it. It would have been really hard had the thread been a match I wouldn't be able to see what I was quilting. So I'm doing the same thing in the purple parts, just from a different perspective. The curls aren't starting down at the point, they're starting at the perimeter where it meets the outer elements. I don't think you'd have to do it that way. That was just a thought that occurred to me and I went with it. And this method was much more continuous, so I liked that. Because I did these, I switched to the purple thread, the variegated, pretty deep in the process. And I wanted it to be expedited. I think that turned out great. The two thread colors I used are both pretty light, which is good because I like to stick with the same thread on top and bobbin, and using really high contrast threads would have given a lot of contrast to the back of the quilt. The back isn't a solid. You'll see photos of it at the very end. But using light-colored thread on light-colored fabric, we ended up with a whole cloth on the back that's extremely striking. So that was a happy occurrence. I had started in the middle of this section, so I had to decide which way the curls were going to go. And then when I quilted the other side, they need to go in the opposite direction, which wasn't that hard to keep track of. This is looking really good. You can also see some straight lines that I've used in other places for, say it with me, for contrast. I think a lot of quilts can really benefit from straight lines for all kinds of reasons. We are getting there. This was a marathon for sure, not a sprint. That's how these kind of star quilts always go. I know some people think, well, let's just do an overall design in here. And you certainly can. I guess you can overall whatever you want to. I think that would be not anywhere near as wonderful as custom quilting, but this is a lot of work. So here's an example of how the straight line quilting went in these particular spikes. It was a matter of getting the angles figured out, but not that hard. Just really, it's just echo quilting, just straight line echo. The tricky part, if there was one, is deciding when to stop the line so that I get the right angle. And now for something completely different. I left these parts unditch quilted. I do not exactly know why. But so I'm doing the ditch quilting, which I think is crucial. As I go along, doing a little meander here. And this slowed down the process, which I now regret. I'm not saying this was bad. It's good. But the payoff wasn't that huge. So I might have found some other thing to do that would be more quick. But it looks great. I love it. So what I'm doing is circles, swirls, echo, and that's pretty much the ball game. I love this combination because it's a lot of fun. But there were a lot of stops and starts just because of where the ditch quilting was and where I ended up with once I got through quilting a specific patch. And I did not yet know how or what I was going to do in the light colored fabric to the left of this blue patch. It would have been nice to get those quilted at the same time. But you don't know how to quilt it until you've done quilted it. The artist's way says, that's the old joke among movie directors, that they know exactly how to direct it after they've made the movie. And I know what they mean. In retrospect, things look obvious, but they don't in the moment sometimes. Here, I probably should have just continuous curved this diamond. That would have been faster and easier. I got the idea just to fill it up with circles. I don't know why. I'm not saying this was wrong. I think it's good. They're pretty irregular. There's not the same number of circles in each diamond. Oh well, that's freehanding for you. And the thread contrasts pretty darn high in here. What would you have done? So I decided to quilt these sections by McTavishing them. This is where you do little bitty S's and then you echo them. I could have done the exact same meander I'd done in those blue patches, but I like to use different designs to give you one more way to, one more cool detail to delight the eye. Okay, we're mercifully running out of design elements. I'm ready to be done with this quilt, gorgeous as it is. And the idea popped into my head, well, let's just echo those petal shapes one more time. So with my trusty arch guide, that's accomplished easily enough. Love it. Really love it. Continuing to echo wouldn't have gotten me very far. The shape changes from an arch to a straight line in no time. So how am I going to fill those spaces? The thread's going to be a contrast. There's not too much of it. I want it to be fast and easy and dynamic. So then the idea popped into my head. Let's do flames. This is just a wavy line. You pick up your speed and make those little flames go every which way, in and out. You can overlap. This is a lot of fun. I love to do flames. It's a little detail. This is where a lot of second guessing happens. Is that going to be good or is that going to be kind of weird? Overthinking is the kiss of death. I've learned over the years that when an idea pops into my head, I need to go with it or spend a lot of time ripping out stitches. You've got to trust your gut. This is kind of where a contrasting thread is a really good thing, because that's a delightful bit of quilting there. I want it to show up. Okay, look at the drama of the back art. Gosh, that looks great. I think we have the visual impact thing down. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this is inspiring. And who knows what the next video will bring. I'll see you then.